Hello, and welcome to the Night Sky Reader. I'm here with a story to help you relax, meditate, or gently drift to sleep. Tonight, Beekeeper's Comb Honey Drip. Settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. The bead is forming so slowly that the evening seems to pool inside it. I am holding the frame at an angle that lets the last of the light pass through, and there at the torn edge of uncapped comb, a single drop of honey is gathering its weight. It swells without haste, amber catching the dusk, and I can feel my own breathing adjust to match its pace. Not a decision, just a response, the way the body follows something slower than itself when given the chance. The apiary quiets around me. The hives stand in their rows, dark and patient, and the air has begun to cool against my forearms. But here in my hands the frame is still warm, still living, still heavy with what the bees have built cell by cell over the long season. I came out here carrying the speed of the day, a call I left awkward and unresolved, a number on a screen I kept returning to, the particular accumulation that has no single cause and no clean remedy. Now I am waiting for this one bead to elongate, to choose its moment, and the waiting is the first true thing I have done since morning. The bead does not hurry. It does not know how. It gathers from the ruptured cells at the lower edge of the comb, drawing upward into itself with a slow mineral patience, rounding into a hemisphere that catches the amber of the sky and holds it, concentrated, warm, a distillation of the whole late summer afternoon hanging at the lip of the wax. I watch the light inside it shift as the dusk shifts. It is not dramatic. It is almost imperceptible, the way a tide is almost imperceptible if you stand still long enough to let it move around you rather than walking toward it. The frame presses warm into my palms. I have time. I had to lift the frame free to find this edge. That was several minutes ago, or perhaps longer. Time moves differently when the smoker is resting in the grass, and the only metric available is the resistance of propolis as a frame loosens from its neighbors. I remember the soft tack of it, the resinous pull, the way the wood held on and then released with a sound like a slow exhale. The hive tool found its purchase and I worked it gently, rocking rather than prying, coaxing rather than forcing. Each stuck frame has its own disposition, its own degree of reluctance, depending on how long the colony has had to seal every seam against moisture and intruders and the general insistence of the world. This one held fast at first, both ends, and then gave at the outer edge with a dry, yielding pop that traveled up through the metal into my wrist. The frame came up dense, bees and honey both, and I lifted it with both hands beneath the lugs, feeling the grain of the cedar against my palms, the slight give of old wax along the bottom bar. It weighs more than you would expect. Not just the wood and combed wax, but the stored summer within it, the condensed hours of foraging that now pull downward with a gentle, insistent gravity. The bees that rode it up rearranged themselves without alarm. They walked the face of the comb with steady, purposeful steps, testing, attending, continuing their work even as the frame moved into open air. I lifted it clear of the hive body and stepped back into the space where the dusk could reach it, and that is when I saw the tear, and the bead already beginning. Now I adjust my grip, barely. A fraction of weight shifted from right hand to left. The frame tilts and the bead thickens, held by surface tension and some patient physics I do not need to name or understand. I am breathing in the scent of warm wax, that particular warmth that the colony maintains and the comb retains, a temperature specific to the hive, to the living interior of the boxes, and identifiable the moment a frame reaches open air and you draw breath close to it. My own breath is slowing. I become aware of the smoker resting nearby in the grass, a thin ribbon still rising from the spout, sweet and faintly acrid, a reminder of the minimal interference required to move among them. I used very little this evening, a few puffs at the entrance before lifting the outer cover, a gentle cloud across the top bars before reaching in, enough for calm passage. The smoke teaches restraint by its own nature. Too much and the whole system is disrupted, too little and the work becomes difficult. What is needed is just enough, held for just long enough, and then set aside. The ribbon drifts low across the grass, thinning into the field scent, losing itself in the dry warmth radiating up from the ground. I watch it go and then bring my attention back to the frame, back to the bead. It catches the fading light from a different angle now as I hold still. Not a single amber shade, but several. A deep garnet at the center, a thinner gold at its widest curve, a pale translucence at the very bottom where the skin of it is thinnest and closest to release. Behind it and around it, the uncapped cells glow with their own quieter light, each hexagonal chamber holding honey at a different stage, some cells barely touched, some almost full, the pale wax rims intact around them, architectural and precise. The comb is not uniform. It is not a factory, where bees worked at different moments, at different intensities. The cells reflect it, some deeper, some shallower, some sealed with a capping of pale beeswax where the honey finished curing, and some left open, still in conversation with the air inside the hive. The section in my hands is mostly uncapped, which is what I came for this evening, the rawer, fresher harvest, still carrying the hive's warmth and something of its complexity. The scent that comes up from the torn edge is not the honey I know from jars or bottles. It is more complicated than that, closer to its origins, floral and faintly fermented, carrying notes of buckwheat and clover and something darker underneath, a depth I cannot name but recognize each time as the smell of the hive's interior life brought briefly into open air. This is honey still in relation to the bees' bodies, still warm from the fanning of their wings, not yet entirely separate from the world that made it. I breathe it in. I let it be what it is. The hum is constant but not loud. It is less sound than sensation, a vibration that I feel as much in my hands as in my ears, the aggregate movement of fanning wings, of thoraxes generating the heat the colony needs, of activity ongoing, and patient and indifferent to my presence, as long as I remain slow enough, calm enough, gentle enough not to register as threat. I do not look directly at the bees on the lower corners of the frame. They move at the periphery of my attention, small and purposeful, pale-banded or dark depending on the queen's line, walking the wax with a delicacy their size should not allow. They are part of the frame's weight, part of its living architecture. I let them continue. My attention circles back to the edge of the comb, to the pale wax rims, to the honey standing in its shallow chambers. A bee crosses the face of the comb at the section where the tear is, pauses at the edge, seems to assess, then continues without alarm. There is no emergency in her movement. There is only the next thing and the next thing, attended to in sequence, without the layering of worry that I carry most hours without noticing. I tilt the frame slightly more. The bead elongates. It becomes a lens for a moment, gold suspended, and I see within its curve the last pale strip of sky above the trees at the far edge of the field. Then the skin of it thins past holding, and the thread begins. Not a fall, not a drop, but a trailing, a slow bridge of amber that lowers from the comb's torn edge toward my thumb where it rests near the bottom bar. The glove leather is worn soft there, and the honey makes contact before I expect it, warm even through the material, spreading with a drag that is not quite like any other sensation. That particular viscous resistance that speaks of density and temperature, and the specific weight of sugars that have concentrated over long weeks of evaporation and fanning and patience. The thread holds. It does not break cleanly. It tapers to a thinness that should not be possible and still maintains connection between comb and thumb, amber at the top shading to a pale gold at the stretch, and at the very end where it has elongated furthest, a small flake of white wax rides along with it, a cap from one of the nearest cells, translucent and thin as paper, clinging to the honey the way a leaf clings to a slow current. I watch it travel. It moves the way time moves when I am not fighting it, steadily, without pausing, without knowing it is being watched. The wax flake catches at the crease of my knuckle and stops. The thread finally releases from the comb above, not suddenly but with a slow withdrawal, and the connection is broken, and there is a moment in my chest that is not quite relief, and not quite loss, but something quieter than either. There is no need to wipe the honey away. The stickiness is information. It tells me the temperature of the hive, the moisture content, the readiness of what remains unkept. More than that, it anchors me. My thoughts, which were scattered when I came out, and still half scattered when I lifted the cover, have gathered here at this point of contact. Condensed, the way the honey condensed. The call I couldn't finish right, the number I kept returning to. I notice I am not thinking of them, the way you notice later that rain has stopped. I am measuring the evening by the cooling of air against the back of my neck, and the drag of amber over glove leather, and the low hum that sits at the edge of hearing and has been there all along. The next bead is already forming where the first one began. I become aware of the grass again. The apiary is larger than this frame, though the frame has been teaching me how to see it. The stacked boxes recede into the gloaming in their uneven rows, their paint gone gray in the failing light, the wood holding its warmth from the afternoon. The field beyond the apiary exhales a different coolness, a vegetative breath that comes from another world, the world of root and stem and open sky, and I can smell it even through the honey and the propolis and the residue of smoke. The smoker sits where I set it down in the grass, the metal body ticking faintly as it cools, contracting in small sounds like the end of something settling. At the hive entrances, the traffic is lighter now. The foragers have come home for the evening, their day mapped into whatever they found and carried and stored. The guards stand at the thresholds without event. My boots sink a little in the soft ground near the hive stand. I shift my weight and feel it, the living give of summer-warm earth. The smoker's last visible thread has dissolved into the cooling air. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a bird calls once and then doesn't. The frame in my hands remains warm, heavier than the wood and wax alone should make it, because it is still full of what the bees collected across the season, still carrying the weight of days I was not present for, flowers I will never see. A summer that exceeds anything I could have attended to even at my most careful. The honey in the uncapped cells glows where the light still reaches it, each chamber its own reservoir, patient and full. The comb I'll cut from this section will come away easily when I'm ready. The knife waits near the smoker, its blade already glazed from earlier frames, carrying amber and the soft residue of propolis. But that motion is not yet. I do not feel the need to move toward it. The evening has its own pace, and I have found it. Finally, the way you find the tempo of a piece of music once you stop anticipating the next note and simply listen. The bead forms again. Same torn edge, same slow swelling. The light is lower now, and the amber the bead catches is deeper, redder, the color of the horizon behind the tree line. I watch it gather as I watched the first one gather, but I am not the same person who watched the first one. Something has shifted in the interval, small, interior, hard to name precisely, the way a room feels different after a window has been opened and closed again, the outside air momentarily present and then gone, leaving the room itself changed by the knowledge of it. The bead holds the darker light without preference or urgency. Behind it, the comb glows in its repeating chambers, each one a record of some particular hour of the season, and the whole frame a kind of archive I am allowed briefly to hold. The bees continue. The hum continues. My breath has found a length it is comfortable with. Longer on the exhale, nothing practiced or deliberate, just what happens when the body recognizes it is somewhere worth staying. I tilt the frame the smallest degree. The bead elongates, catches the last light, becomes briefly a lens for the whole dimming sky, and then the thread finds my thumb again, warm and unhurried, and something in me receives it the way the evening receives the smoker's last ribbon, without comment, without needing it to be more than it is. I hold the frame. The frame holds the comb. The comb holds the honey. The honey gathers at the edge, and somewhere in the next cell, in the slow work of evaporation still ongoing even now, another bead is already beginning to form. The apiary continues in the dusk. The smoker cools in the grass. My breath moves and moves and moves, slow as amber, patient as wax, and the bead at the torn edge swells without hurry, catching what little light remains, holding it, rounding into itself, full with its own weight and ready, when the moment comes, to let go. Thank you for spending this time with the night sky reader. May your night be peaceful. Until next time, rest well.